Good morning and welcome back to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is gifts and curses. And I'm excited to share that with you. Let's just start out first by bringing ourselves present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose. Fill your lungs up with oxygen and just feel the energy of that moving through your body. And as you exhale, just exhale any tension that you might be holding in your neck, in your shoulder, in your back, your jaw. And let's take another deep breath in through your nose. And feel the vitality and life just coursing through you. And as you exhale, exhale anything that was an obstruction or a block or a tension, and just relax. And then let's just place our palms gently together and softly rub your fingers against your palms and feel that tingling. Just feel your palms, feel your fingers, and the deliciousness of being in this physical body. Bring yourself present and welcome. So today we're going to talk about, good morning, Dido, first. Hi, welcome. So glad you're here. We're going to talk about gifts and curses and how our greatest gifts are often our greatest curse or challenge. And I think that this is a really interesting and tricky topic. So I'm excited to see what comes out of this discussion. Good morning, Hope. Hope Wellington Marshall. Glad to have you here. Welcome. We're talking about gifts and curses, or maybe gifts and challenges. So let's look at examples of how our greatest gifts can be our greatest challenges as well, or how our greatest challenges are our greatest gifts, depending on how you want to look at it. So, for instance, uh, I have in my life been graced with stubbornness, and it showed up as stubbornness in many times in my life in the long ago past. And I guess with the stubbornness came like a rigidity and there was defense, and so it wasn't the best. Uh, it wasn't the highest expression of my capacity. Let's just say it that way. So, however, that stubbornness is in its positive side, on its gift side, is perseverance and persistence. And that has served me really, really, really well, because I can or I have on many occasions moved through circumstances that required my determination. And because I had that stubborn stick to itiveness, I was able to get to the other side of those circumstances, or accomplish something that was really challenging, or or stick with something until I found a solution. And so with the stubbornness being motivated a little bit by fear, fear that like there was a challenge, and so there's a like a push to stubbornness. What I notice is that persistence and determination was characterized more by a hopefulness and a trust, which is really, really interesting. So I am coming to these polarities through um, through the exposure to this awesome book called The Gene Keys, from Richard Rudd. I've mentioned it before. Uh, it's a brilliant book. It's based on the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching, which is an ancient Chinese book of wisdom and divination. And what the Gene Keys is about is mapping human evolution of consciousness and being to each of these different hexagrams as like genetic encoding within us. And where where the gift and the challenge sort of idea come from is that each of these gene keys has a shadow and a gift and an elevated transformation called a city. And good morning, Jennifer. Welcome back. So glad you're here. We're talking about gifts and curses, or gifts and challenges, and how our how we manifest them in life. So I'm talking about the light and dark side of stubbornness, which stubbornness on the dark side, perhaps, and perseverance and determination on the light side. And so I was saying that the dark side of stubbornness is kind of motivated by fear and resistance. And I'm saying fear because it's like when there's a challenge, there's a pushback, and that pushback is maybe responding to the feeling of being threatened, um, and therefore there has to be this defense. Whereas on the other side, where we're looking at determination or perseverance, that may be more characterized by a hopefulness and a trust that as I rally my resources to persist in whatever venture I'm engaged in, that's driven by a hopefulness that there is going to be a positive outcome, or a trust, even more than hopefulness, that there's going to be a positive outcome. So that's one example. Let's think of another example. Generosity. Okay, so here's a link to the Gene Keys. Yay! Thank you so much for posting that, Dido. That's awesome. I really recommend this book. I I, uh, I have such a reverence and appreciation for well-crafted language and beautiful ideas, and this book is filled with both. So I can't recommend it more highly. It is transformational. Anyway, getting back to generosity. So generosity, we think of generosity as a beautiful trait, right? To be generous of spirit. And um, I want to look at the two sides of this. I don't know that I would use different words, but certain generosity or certain givingness can be really driven by a feeling of inadequacy and lack. And it's giving in order to receive, or giving in order to achieve some level of acceptance, or to engender appreciation, or for a motive, right? And so it's interesting that the trait of generosity can be at its foundation an expression of lack or inadequacy. And that would be the shadow side. And that kind of generosity or giving ends up engendering resentment oftentimes, because people overgive. You know, people are always doing things for other people, and then when other people don't reciprocate, there's the feeling of resentment or depletion that comes along with that. And the other side, the gift side of generosity is to be giving without an agenda, for the pure joy of it, for the pure joy of sharing, for just to be of generous nature. That is an expression of deep love. It's an expression of love and presence. So even generosity can have its dark side. um, and I guess what we're talking about ultimately is light and shadow, and how that is what life is made of, is light and shadow. And we don't have light without shadow, and we don't have shadow without light. And what the conversation is really leading to is to look at the things that we criticize ourselves for, uh, and to look for the gift in those things as well. So, for instance, let's look at anger. We might think that anger has no redeeming characteristic, but what is anger? Anger is passion. Anger is a welling up of a sense of, um, well, it's a profound energy, the energy of anger. And so let's look, where is there a positive side to anger? It's kind of, a recognition that there's been some kind of violation. And as we can recognize that, um, that passion, and harness that passion and direct that passion, maybe we can call it, uh, passion. Um, we can also look at it as reactivity. Okay, so it's an extreme form of reactivity, but it is a response. It is it's having, um, an important response to something that feels like a violation. And if we can, I'm going to look at it not in terms of interpersonal things, but for right now, let's say we look at a situation in our culture, and it brings up this anger, this rage. And what we can notice about that anger or rage that's generated in us is that there is a really strong response to something, a passion, and that anger can be redirected, or the energy of that anger can be redirected into activity and into expression of that passion through positive action. So, if we have anger, what we can notice is that there that we're connected to some kind of deep emotion, which is really powerful, and more powerful than a, an disconnection or a neutrality, really. And we can take that energy of that anger and redirect it into something that that is powerful and positive. And I think that it's actually kind of a new connection for me, like recognizing right now anger and passion, that they're very, very closely tied. And that anger is one expression of passion, and a sense of justice, probably, too. And so, as if you have issues around anger, maybe the thing to do is to be looking at what is the gift side of that for you, like what in you is that anger expressing, and then to flip it on its side and see what is available to you from that anger as a gift. There's so much energy there. Um, and let's look at, what else can we look at? Selfishness. Okay, we looked at generosity. Let's look at selfishness. So, selfishness on its dark side means separation and lack of concern for others. On its positive side, what it can express as is caring for oneself, taking care of oneself, putting positive attention on oneself, preserving oneself, and therefore, as we take richer care of ourselves, we're better able to care for others. Without caring for ourselves, there's no reserve to be able to share with others and to offer as a gift. So we hear a lot about the importance. I think now it's kind of in vogue. Selfishness is kind of in vogue. So what happens as we take care of ourselves? Well, what happens is that it doesn't actually have to take from others. It is a generous, self-loving that that is necessary, actually. Before we can purely love another, we really truly need to be loving ourselves. And again, the dark side of selfishness is driven by fear, or fear of lack, fear of maybe being taken advantage of, uh, fear that the world isn't a safe place. Whereas when we can be positively selfish, when we can nourish and nurture ourselves, once again, we have greater resources to share with the world in whatever way uh, we are inspired to do so. So I I invite you to look at the things that you criticize yourself for and the things that you praise yourself for, and notice what is available, like what the light and the dark are of those things, and of those things particularly that we take on as identity. So here's another example. Uh, I want to talk about an identity, for instance, as a high achiever. That's something that I think I've mentioned this before, but it still sticks with me pretty intensely. Um, so I have a client who identified as a high achiever. And as a result of being a high achiever, there was always this incredible drive to have to perform in everything and anything. And it became, initially, it was something that was a strength to be a high achiever, and it can be a strength. But it also ultimately became a constraint and a box and a limit, because there were areas where this person didn't perform to their standards, and they couldn't allow themselves to just be. And I, I I think being a high achiever, or achieving, is great when it's coming from the inside out, when it's going from the outside in terms of an identity that you need to live up to or live into. Then it can be really, really, really damaging. And Dido says, so true. This is, we were talking about the multiple sides of emotion. So Dido says, so true, Mira. This goes way beyond the oversimplistic thinking of emotions as traits, as just negative or positive. For example, grief is seen as negative, but can open your heart to expand your compassion for others. Exactly, exactly. So the things that, the challenges that we have in life, that we see as tragedies, are often the source of the transformation that creates our greatest fulfillment. And Dido says, this brings a holistic perspective. Love it. Thank you. And Jennifer says, I'm taking this all in this morning, heading out for doctor's appointments. We'll watch the replay and comment more. Have a blessed day. Namaste. Thank you, Jennifer. Namaste to you. I hope everything is okay with the doctors. Um, so what we're really looking at is um, kind of the stripping away of a notion of a pure notion of good and bad, because within everything lies a gift, and within everything lies a challenge. And as we recognize that, it can give us greater acceptance of everything, and of being ourselves in our greatest richness. So um, recognizing uh, going numb. Okay, here's another just example. I was thinking of another client who has allowed has allowed herself to, actually not just allowed herself, but she found a brilliant strategy in the context of her life, which was to numb her feelings. And it was a powerful and really survival based strategy for her, because if she were to be having emotional responses to the circumstances of her life, she would have been endangered, physically endangered in her life. So by numbing her feelings, by shutting down her responses, she was able to navigate a very, very, very dangerous and challenging terrain. So it was a survival strategy. And then eventually, that circumstance no longer existed. However, she had she had ingrained this capacity to numb her feelings so thoroughly that she wasn't able to find her way out of that. So it was a gift, and then it became a great challenge to start recovering and re experiencing these emotions, to allow herself to feel her feelings again, and to move into the safety of allowing herself to expand and move beyond the 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 shadow side of this numbness that had really saved her life. So like the things that the strategies that we develop to survive are things that we then eventually need to evolve beyond. And the same thing as Dido was saying about grief, you know, grief is a powerful vehicle for opening one's heart. And yet, we want to be able to move beyond that as well, you know, to not be living exclusively in grief. So by experiencing our grief, we have the opportunity to open and enrich our hearts, and then to move beyond that into, I imagine, the movement from grief through the deepening of the heart is a movement into deeper love. So play with these ideas. Notice the things that you think are your greatest weaknesses. Recognize how they were mostly developed by you, probably as a survival strategy. So if I go back to anger, anger could be a really, really powerful survival strategy in the face of an ongoing threat. So when there's an ongoing threat, anger and the push of anger, it acts as a defense and a preservation mechanism, and the passion associated with it. But then as anger becomes a deeply entrenched pattern, then it can be life threatening, because you could be angry in a situation that uh, makes that situation become explosive. So what today is talking about is balancing and bouncing between polarities and perception of uh, gift versus curse, or gift versus challenge, and uh, being willing to find the gift in any circumstance, whether it's in a circumstance of emotion or a circumstance of life, to find the gift, and to find the challenge, and to find a way to utilize those polarities to expand your experience of life. So that's it for today. I hope that this conversation was served to help open minds and hearts. And please check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I'm here daily during the week at 9 a.m. Eastern. Hope to see you again soon. Thanks so much for being with me.